My dad always said that on record, this was probably the longest known tribal Squaxin fishery is Eld Inlet. That's what he has told me just from his known. Great-grandma used to always tell me that when I was little baby, my dad had put me in like a crib board. And my great-grandma had her view was over Eld Inlet. And she goes, one day you're gonna be fishing out here. And she propped me up. She said, I propped you up on the table. And I said, you're gonna be down here like your great-grandpa, like your dad. My name is Joe Peters. I work for the Squaxin Island Natural Resources Department, and I am the Natural Resources Policy Representative. I also manage the tribe's salmon fisheries and the hunting management side of things. As a tribal member for the Squaxin Island tribe, you know, a healthy Eld Inlet provides healthy fish for me. So if we are restoring land that is going to protect those fish, I know that in the future I will have hopefully have a sustainable run of fish.
We bought 45 acres down here on Mud Bay, which is a lower part of Eld Inlet. It's sort of the estuary where McLean Creek drains into Eld Inlet. This property had been for a long time used for agricultural uses. So there was grazing and livestock raising, things like that out here. When it became clear that we were gonna be able to purchase the 45 acres here, we realized we needed to do some restoration work as well. Because there's very few native species there, and it's all sort of these imported pasture grasses, it just gets taken over very quickly by noxious weeds. The goal of this project was to get some seed source here and to get, you know, kind of some level of native plant material here so that it could begin to you know, compete with the blackberries and the other invasives, and hopefully over time, you know, maybe in 40 years or 60 years, we would see this property look a lot more natural than it does right now. And so we were fortunate to be able to get several grants that had a restoration component to them. One of them was through the National Estuary Program. It's funded through the Environmental Protection Agency. We also got funding through the National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Grant. That's a grant through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Once we had that funding in place, then we could engage with partners to make some of the restoration work happen. Thurston Conservation District has a Veterans Conservation Corps, or the VCC, where they work with veterans to connect them with jobs dealing with restoration. We hired this Veterans Conservation Corps crew to come out here and remove a lot of fencing. The problem with the fencing, with this old derelict fencing, is that it just prevents animals from being able to move freely. The elk really rely on this sort of open areas to graze and just spend the winter.
My name is Ben Alexander, and my job is restoration ecologist. My role in the Eld Inlet Restoration Project is I'm the primary planner who's put together the ecological restoration plans here, as well as we are operating the crews that are doing actual invasive weed removal and planting on the shoreline and throughout these properties. The actual field work began with invasive species removal. There was a lot of particularly Himalayan blackberry on the site. Himalayan blackberry just runs over all of the other native species, and it suppresses a lot of plant growth, and it makes it difficult for other plants to get established. There was also patches with dense reed canary grass, which is another invasive species that chokes out streams and it destroys fish habitat, and it's really difficult to get rid of. There was also Scotch broom growing along the shoreline, which also, it has this effect where it makes other plants won't grow around it. It's called an allelopathic effect. We did some judicious use of herbicide as well as manual control methods, just digging things up by the roots. And then coming back later in the fall, we came in and chopped out all of the dead weed material to allow us to create spaces for planting. And now we are into the planting phase, where we're going along several of these places where we've done invasive species control, and we're planting native trees and shrubs. One of the issues on the shoreline here is that there's a lot of erosion going on because the native vegetation was all grazed off the site. So we chose species that have very specific erosion control characteristics. We're planting snowberry, which spreads by rhizomes and is really good at holding the soil together. Soon we'll be planting hooker willow, which is a native shrubby willow, and that will go in all along the eroding banks, and that will help prevent further erosion. We're also planting a variety of conifers, and the conifers are important because they provide, they're long-lasting, they're long-lived, and they provide wood to the shoreline, which is an important component of the ecosystem here. It helps provide habitat for insects and for fish that swim and hide under it.
So the species of salmon that you can find in lower Eld Inlet are chum salmon, coho salmon. You get some cutthroat salmon, rainbow trout in the upper creek areas, and possibly some steelhead salmon down here. I wouldn't say a lot of those, but yeah, mostly chum salmon come up through here. I have a huge passion for fish growing up as a fisherman, being a fisherman my whole life, and learning from my ancestors and my relatives on how important fish are to our people. So this is important. We continue to do little projects like this. These projects will start connecting to each other, and you'll have a lot more larger land bases that are conservation based and protecting those resources that are here for all of us to enjoy.
The Mud Bay area is an area that Capital Land Trust has been doing quite a bit of conservation work on, and restoration work for that matter. We've conserved multiple miles of shoreline, over 200 acres of property here in sort of the lower Eld Mud Bay area. We're providing fish and wildlife habitat. There's all the ecosystem services that we sort of forget about, but things like clean air, clean water, carbon storage, buffering against climate change, climate resiliency, all those things I think are things that come along with doing land conservation.